Professor Zix441 clicked her mandibles in what the diverse class had learned to recognize as approval. The Advanced Survival Techniques course drew students from across the Galactic Coalition, each species bringing their own evolutionary advantages to the academic table. Today's practical examination would test their ability to construct emergency shelters using only classroom materials. "You have 30 standard minutes," the insectoid professor announced, her compound eyes scanning the lecture hall. "Environmental conditions will simulate a Class 7 ice storm. Failure to maintain core temperature will result in educational consequences." The students scattered immediately. The crystals began harmonically resonating with the metal chair frames, slowly reshaping them into geodesic domes. Their silicon-based physiology allowed them to manipulate minerals through controlled vibrations, an elegant solution that had earned their species the nickname living tuning forks among the other students. Near the back, 3 Vorthon exchange students worked in perfect synchronization. Their shared hive mind consciousness made them incredibly efficient builders. They stripped the synthetic fabric from chairs and wove it into insulated walls with mathematical precision, their 6 arms working faster than most organic eyes could follow. Within minutes, they had constructed what looked like a professional emergency shelter. The Aquan delegate, reef singer Coraleth, faced a different challenge entirely. Her gills fluttered anxiously as she tried to work with the dry materials. Her people's hydroponic cities existed in perfect climate control. This kind of primitive construction was foreign to her experience. She managed to create a small enclosure using desk drawers filled with water, hoping to create a humid microclimate, but it looked precarious at best. Dr. Thornwall, the massive Ursine professor emeritus visiting from the Claw worlds, methodically arranged desks into a cave-like structure. His people had evolved from apex predators on a world of endless winter. He understood shelter construction instinctively, layering materials to create dead air spaces for insulation. His solution was bulky, but undeniably functional. And then there was Marcus Chen. The human sat quietly for the first 5 minutes, apparently doing nothing while his classmates rushed around him. Professor Zix441 noted his inactivity with curiosity. Humans were relatively new to the coalition, their species having achieved interstellar travel only 2 centuries ago. They were considered industrious but unremarkable. No natural armor, no exotic abilities, no specialized environmental adaptations. Just clever tool users with an unusual persistence drive. Marcus finally stood and began his work. What followed made even the professor pause her evaluation rounds. The human grabbed 2 desks and flipped them on their sides, creating an L-shaped corner. But instead of simply placing them together, he wedged the leg of one desk into the support structure of the other, creating a joint that was somehow stronger than either desk alone. He repeated this process, but each connection was different, adapted to the specific stresses and angles involved. When he needed to fill gaps, Marcus didn't just stuff material into spaces. He removed his jacket, a simple cloth garment, and began tearing it into strips. But he didn't tear randomly. Each strip was measured against his forearm, twisted into cordage, then woven through the desk supports in patterns that created tension webs. The fabric wasn't just filling space, it was becoming part of the structural system. The most remarkable moment came when Marcus encountered a problem none of the other species had faced. His makeshift shelter was solid but had a critical weak point where 3 different materials met. Instead of rebuilding, he stared at the junction for nearly a minute. Then he removed one of his boots. The Kristen working nearby stopped her harmonic resonance. "Is the human removing protective covering?" Marcus used the boot's lace as a flexible joint, threading it through metal, fabric, and plastic in a complex pattern that somehow held everything together while allowing for thermal expansion. He then used the boot itself as a counterweight, creating a self-tensioning system. But the truly human moment came next. Marcus noticed the Aquan student struggling with her water-based shelter design. Without a word, he modified his own structure, extending one wall to create a shared space that protected both their shelters while allowing Coraleth access to her humidity system. He didn't ask permission or expect reciprocation. He simply saw a problem and solved it. Professor Zix441 activated the environmental simulation. Temperatures plummeted. Artificial wind howled through the lecture hall. Ice crystals began forming on every surface. The crystalline dome held perfectly, its resonance-welded joints unaffected by the cold. The Vorthon shelter maintained ideal internal temperature through their precisely calculated insulation. Dr. Thornwall's cave structure became a warm haven that could have housed 3 students his size. Marcus's cobbled-together contraption of desks, jacket strips, and a boot shouldn't have worked at all. Every engineering principle suggested it should have collapsed immediately. The materials were mismatched, the joints improvised, the design, apparently chaotic. It didn't just survive the storm, it adapted to it. As the temperature dropped, the jacket strips contracted, actually tightening the structure. The bootlace joint absorbed the stress of thermal expansion while maintaining integrity. The angled desk arrangement created air circulation patterns that prevented ice buildup while retaining heat. Most remarkably, the extension that protected Corolith actually made the entire structure more stable, not less. When the simulation ended, Professor Zix441 approached Marcus's shelter with professional interest that bordered on bewilderment. "Explain your methodology, Human Chen." Marcus looked genuinely confused by the question. "I used what was available? The desks had these attachment points and the jacket was going to get cold anyway, so..." He gestured helplessly. "I just made it work." "Made it work?" the professor repeated slowly. Despite having no specialized construction abilities, no shared consciousness for coordination, no material manipulation powers, and no evolutionary adaptation for extreme cold survival. "Well, yeah." Professor Zix441 made several notes on her datapad. In her report to the Coalition Science Council, she would write, "Human engineering philosophy appears to be adaptive improvisation under constraints. Rather than optimizing for ideal conditions, they design for survival under the assumption that conditions will be suboptimal. This approach yields solutions that are technically inferior but functionally superior. Recommend further study." What she didn't include in her official report was her private observation. Humans didn't just solve problems. They solved problems, while solving other people's problems, using materials that shouldn't work, in ways that violated conventional engineering wisdom, and somehow it worked every time. As the class filed out, Marcus was already helping Corolith modify her shelter design for the next practical exam. The Aquan watched with fascination as he explained how to use thermal differential to create structural tension. "Your people," she said thoughtfully, "do not build the best shelters?" Marcus shrugged. "Probably not. But somehow everyone stays warm." He considered this for a moment, then smiled. "Yeah, I guess that's kind of the point." Behind them, Professor Zix441 was still studying the bootlace joint, trying to understand how something so primitive could be so effective. She would spend the next 3 months analyzing the human solution, eventually publishing a paper that would revolutionize emergency engineering across the Coalition. The paper's conclusion would become famous throughout the galaxy. Human technology is not superior. Human thinking is.